Hi everyone, in this video we're going to learn how to use RStudio. RStudio is a very popular programming language for R, and we're going to go into all the functions and features that it has for coding. If you've never used R before or RStudio before, that's no problem. We're going to go into all the details, and if you want to learn more about R programming and how to apply different applications and different functions, I post videos on that topic every single week. So let's jump in and get started. So this video assumes that you already have R and RStudio installed. If you don't, that's no problem at all. I will include a link to this page right here on postit.co. On this page, you can see that it has a couple links here, install R and install RStudio, and you want to click the first one to install R. It's very important that you install R first, and then you can install RStudio after. Downloading them is very easy, just a couple buttons and a couple clicks, and then we can get started. I also have a video that walks you through this process, so if you want to see a step-by-step walkthrough on how to download them, I have a video on my channel, and I'll link it below as well. So let's go ahead and open RStudio and get started. So this is what RStudio looks like when you open it. We have 4 main sections that we're working with, and we're going to dive deeply into what each of these sections do. So let's talk about where you write your R code. That typically happens, well, it only happens here in the code editor, which is the top left corner. It'll be a essentially white square. And this is where you write all of your code that you want to keep, because you save it to an R file. And we'll do that in this video as well. So let's just jump right into it and write a piece of code. I'm going to write print hello world, the iconic first line that you write in almost every software program. So print hello world, I write it in this editor, and then when I run it, we can view it in the console. So the console is this box here at the bottom, and we can make it bigger by clicking this button here. When you click that, it opens up this window here. This window is where you see the output of your code. And right now, because we just opened the program, there's a lot of detail here on the type of R version you're using and some other information about R as a language. Nothing that we need to worry about right now. And we can get rid of all of this by clicking this broom button right here. So I'm going to click that, and now it's clean. So we wrote print hello world. If we want to run it, we can just make sure that our mouse is right next to the line of code, and then we click run. So run is this button right here. Let's click it, and you can see it's printing out hello world directly into the console. Plain and simple. If I were to do 1 plus 5 and then click run, you would see the output here as well. So any code that you're running in RStudio will show up in the console. You can also write code directly in the console like this, 1 plus 1. You can see that I did that just over here, but you can't save anything that you do in the console. It's great for testing pieces of code. It's great for checking certain things about your data frames, but you can't save anything that you do here, so just be mindful of that. So let's run the 1 plus 1, and you can see the output right there. So let's close the console for a second and go back to our script. We wrote a piece of script here. If we want to save it, you can click this save button just over here. I'm going to save mine to my desktop. Okay, so I saved it. I called it samplecode.r, and you can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. And you'll see that the title of your script will show up in the tab. If I were to open up a second piece of R script, I can do that by clicking this open button right here, and it'll open up a second piece of code. Okay, so let's go back to the console for a moment. I always change the layout of my RStudio because I like having my R script on the left-hand side and my console on the right-hand side. So I'm actually going to change the layout of these 4 panes. And then once we do that, we can dive into what the other panes do. So if you're like me and you want to change the layout of what this looks like, you can click Tools and then Global Options. Once you do that, it opens up a window, and this allows you to change the default settings in RStudio. So I'm going to go ahead and click pane layout. And this is how the 4 boxes or the 4 different sections of RStudio are laid out. And I want my console on the right-hand side. So I'm going to click the right-hand pane here, which is where our environment currently is. And I'm going to click console. And then I'm going to scroll down and click apply. And then we click OK to close the window. And there you go. You can see now we have, I'll move my window down here. You can see now we have our code on the left-hand side and our console on the right-hand side. Okay, so we know where we write our script and we know where we see our script, which is in the console. What if we have variables? What if we want to see what's actually being saved as variables in our script? That's where our environment comes into play. So let's click on environment. It opens up, and right now the environment is empty, which makes sense because we don't actually have any variables saved. We have a print statement and we have a calculation, but it's not being saved to a variable. So let's create a variable and see what happens. I'm going to take this 1 plus 5 statement and I'm going to make a equal 1 plus 5. And when I do this, because we changed the code, you'll see that sample code.r has become red and there's a star next to it. And that means that your code is now different from what it was before. And if you want to save those changes, you need to go ahead and save them. I want to save this and I want to save these changes that we just made. So I'm going to click the save button again. And now it's back to being black. So we saved 1 plus 5 to a variable called a, and I'm going to run the entire script again, or run the code on line 4 again. Let's click run. And now you can see a has been run, and it's not appearing as 6 in the console because it's no longer outputting to the console directly. It's being saved to a variable. And the variable is now available in the environment. So we have a here, and we can see that a is equal to 6. So when you're creating variables and you're storing data within those variables, they always appear in the environment. So if I were to create another variable called b and call it hello world, and I run it, you can see here, b is now equal to hello world. So that's that. If I want to print a variable, I can do that by just typing out print, the print function, and then within there, you can print whatever variable you want. So you can see now in the console, we have print, and it's equal to 6. So the environment is a great way of looking at which variables you have. If I was ever trying to double check a variable name, the environment is a great place to go look. You can also save your data and your variables from R. So if you're working with hundreds or thousands of variables, you don't have to rerun your script every single time to get those variables into your environment. You can save everything that you've already created and save it to an R data file. We're going to dig into a lot of that later, but right now let's close the environment because we know what it's doing, and we'll go back to our console and our script. So again, I made some changes here. I'm going to save it, and then we're going to move into the console window again. So here, if I want to remove any of this, I can click the broom, and we have a clear screen once more. There's also a terminal window. And in this terminal window, you can run R from terminal. And we're not going to go into that into much detail here because I think that if you're new to R and you're new to R programming, using terminal from RStudio is not something that you commonly do. So we don't need to worry about that right now. All you need to know is that the terminal window operates the same way as your computer's terminal. And if you ever want to run R from there, you can do it here, or you can do it from your computer's terminal window. So that's that. So let's dig into what all of these different tabs mean in the bottom right-hand corner. So the Files tab allows you to essentially scroll through files on your computer. It's no different than using your Finder on a MacBook or a File Explorer on any other computer. And it just allows you to quickly rifle through your documents and find what you're looking for. If you want to use one of these folders to set your working directory, you can do that. So if I wanted to set my working directory to my home folder, I could just click more and then set as working directory. I'm not going to do that right now, but it's just a great way of quickly accessing the folders that you want to work with. The plots pane allows you to view any graphics or plots or charts that you are plotting from your R script, and we'll do an example of that later. And then finally, the packages tab allows you to pick and choose any packages you want, and you can quickly install them or import them into your library. Once you become better at R programming, you won't really be using this tab. You'll just install them. You'll code the function to install them yourself or to import them yourself, but it's a great way to go through different packages that you might be looking for and find what you need. Okay, so the next thing I want to go over is the comments. So how to use comments in RStudio. If you have never coded in R, that's completely fine. A comment is essentially a way to include text in your script without it being code. So if I want to create a comment in R, I can just use the number sign and then write, this is a comment. And when I run this, if I were to highlight and run this, let's move this over a little bit, run, you can see that it outputs to the console, but nothing happens. Whereas if I were to do, this is a comment, and then run that, I would get an error. So the commenting feature in R is really important, of course, but what I want to show you is how to use comments as headers using RStudio. So if I wanted to turn this into a title, import libraries. If I wanted that to be the first section of my code and I want to quickly reference it when I'm writing a very long script, I would install multiple number signs, 4 of them on each side, and then when you do that, it actually becomes a header. So you'll see down here, I have a header that says import libraries because that's what my title is called. If I copy this and place it down here and call it import data, I'll get multiple titles. So this is a really great feature of RStudio because when you're writing a script and it's 300 lines of code or more, you don't want to be scrolling up and down. You want to have headers, and then you want to be able to quickly access different parts of your code base. Okay, so another important feature is shortcuts. Shortcuts are critical when you're coding because you want to quickly be able to run your code, comment things, and switch between the editor and the console without having to click and run every single time. So you can view the shortcuts by clicking Tools and Modify Keyboard Shortcuts. I have modified quite a few of my shortcuts, mainly switching between the console, the source and the console. By source, I mean the editor. And my shortcut is Command P on my MacBook. But shortcuts are really important because it allows you to quickly do what you need to do without slowing down and clicking things. So the one that I would recommend you review is running a line of code. So for us, that would be run all code in current source file. That allows you to run your entire script, or run current line or selection. So for me, I never really run my entire R script. I essentially just highlight everything and then click Command Enter if I want to run the whole script. But more commonly, I'll run it line by line. So for me, my shortcut is Command Enter. If you want to modify any of these actions, you can go to Tools, Modify Keyboard Shortcuts, like I said, and then click on the action that you want to modify, and then go in and input the shortcut that you want to use. So I can change this run current line or selection option to Command R, but I like Command Enter, so I'm going to go back and switch it, Command Enter, and that's that. So it's very important that you review these and then start implementing them because it just makes your workflow a lot faster. I'm going to close this. So the other thing I want to show you is how to modify the aesthetic of your script in R. Sometimes you'll write comments that are very long and wordy for whatever reason. You know, you want to explain what you're doing here for your future self or for a colleague or a classmate. Sometimes you end up with big blocks of text in your code. So I'm going to write a quick sample piece. This line of code does X, Y, and Z. It also imports data from my desktop, and then I run a machine learning model on it. Okay, great. I have a comment here. The problem is I don't want to have to stretch out my editor to read the whole comment. So what you can do in this case, let me just quickly save this. What I can do is click Code, the Code tab, and then Soft Wrap Long Lines. And now you can see the entire comment without having to move your editor back and forth. So another interesting feature of RStudio that you might find valuable. Now let's figure out how to view a plot in R. So we're going to create two variables and then plot them on a simple scatter plot. I'll create a variable called W, and it'll just be a vector of numbers. W equals 1, 5, 9. And then I'll create a second variable that's the same length, but with different numbers. Let's run both lines, and then we'll create a very simple scatter plot with W and Z plotted next to each other. And you can see my scatter plot pops up in my Plots tab. So when you are plotting anything, it'll show up in this tab. And this tab also has a couple great features. You can zoom to see a bigger version of it, just like that. You can export it as an image, PDF, or copy it into something else you're working on. You can also erase it from this viewer. It'll prompt a yes or no question. We click yes because we want to get rid of it. And that's how you view plots in RStudio. Now, let's go back to packages for a moment. If I have a library that I want to import, I can find it here. If you don't want to do that and you want to hard code it into your script, you can just type in library and then the library that you want to import. So if we do tidyverse, that's how you would import it. But if you wanted to scroll through the packages pane, I can also Google tidyverse, and I've already installed it, so there's a check mark here. But if I wanted to install it from the packages tab, I could just click it, and it'll import automatically. Now, the next thing I want to show you is how to save your environment variables. Right now, we only have 4 variables, and they're extremely simple, so the value in saving your environment data is not clear here, but there's going to be a point when you're using many gigabytes worth of data or millions and millions of rows of data. And if you're modifying it or running a machine learning model on it, you don't want to do that every single time. You want to be able to open up your R code, import the data that you've already modified, and then move on to the next step. So what we can do is save the environment data to a variable, to a file. So what you would do is click Save, and when you click Save, it'll open up your File Explorer or your Finder, whatever it is, and you'll notice that it defaults to an untitled document with an R data extension. This is just a way to store data from your R project. And I'm going to call mine Intro to RStudio and then save it. So you can see right here in my script, it's been saved. And what I'm going to do is actually erase everything from my environment and then re-import it. If I want to erase everything, I can click the broom right here. It'll ask me if I want to remove everything. I know I do. And now I have my environment empty. It's like I never wrote anything at all. So if I want to go back and import that data that I just saved, I can click this folder button and re-import it from the Finder window. So I can see it here in my Finder, and I'm going to click Open. And you'll see it load in the console. And in the environment, you can see all of my variables have been re-imported. So when you start working with a lot of complex data, this saves you a lot of time because you don't have to go back and rerun all of your scripts. And eventually you won't even have to click these buttons. You'll hard code the save image function and the load function with your data frames directly in your script. So we've covered a lot of the best features in RStudio. There's one more thing I would like to show you, and that's how to access external datasets within your RStudio environment. Let's pretend for a moment that you have a CSV data file and you want to import it into your workspace or your project, I'm going to show you how to do that. So the best way to do this is by setting a working directory and then importing just the file name or hard coding just the file name in your script. So what I can do is click Session and then Set Working Directory. You want to point your working directory to where your data is saved. So I'm going to find the folder where my data is saved. So I have a sample data folder here. It's just called sample data. I'm going to use this folder as my working directory. So now that I've navigated to this folder, I'm going to click Open. And you'll see that now we have set working directory as our working directory. And right now it's just in the console, but in the future I want to make sure that I'm still pointing to this folder. So I can actually copy this line of code from the console and just leave it here at the top of my script, click Save. And now next time I open up this script or this project, my code will know that I'm working with data in this sample data folder. So now R knows where to find data that I'm referencing in my script. So I have a CSV in this folder called sample data. I have a CSV called sampledf.csv. I want to import that into my R project. So what I would do is set a variable name. I'll just call it df for data frame right now. And I would use a function called readCSV and then type out sampledf.csv. We click enter, and there you go. So we didn't get any errors, and that means that our data was imported correctly. There were no issues. The reason I didn't have to put the full file path name is because RStudio already knows that I'm working in the sample data folder. If I didn't have this set up, I would get an error if I ran this line of code. I imported the CSV and now I want to see what it looks like. I can take a look at it in the console by using the head function, head df, that will give me the first 6 rows of this data frame, like that. Or I can use another cool feature of RStudio and click the view function, view with a capital V. And by typing out view and then the name of my data frame, it'll open up a different tab with just my data. So we have view df. I'm going to use my shortcut to run this line of code. And you can see it opens up a new tab here. I can see my data. I can see the number of columns, the number of entries, and I can scroll through and take a look at what I'm working with. So that's a great feature within RStudio, and if you're working with a large data frame, sometimes it's nice to just view it in its own window like this. So that pretty much covers the most important functions in RStudio. Again, if you've never used the software before, these are the functions that really help you get started. We know how to write an R script, save it, how to import libraries, how to import data, and how to save our environment data as well. So I think that covers what you need to know as a new user. Good luck, and if you have any questions, please let me know, and thanks for watching.